This is open Q&A, so the ball's in your court. Yeah.
Rabbi, happy to get you back.
Thank you.
Well, I've got a question on when Moshiach comes, maybe Hashem today. I got a question that would Hashem, I don't know if we're going to be told to take back land, so to say land that is ours, that is occupied at the moment, and if so, would Yeshiva Bochurim, so to say, be drafted to take back our land?
Interesting question. Okay, Mashiach comes. When we take back land, it will be drafted and go and fight. The description of Mashiach is a time when the whole world understands that there is a creator and that he's the God of Israel and that the Jewish people are special. No one will be opposing us. No one will be depriving us. No one will be fighting with us. Hashem. The whole world will be filled with knowledge of Hashem, and there will be no need to take anything. It will be something which they will all cooperate in and be happy about. So that's now there are various different descriptions of what the times of the Mashiach will be like, and the Rambam tells us that we don't really know what they mean. So I can't. But this is something which I think is common to all of them. You're welcome. Yeah, what's noch? Yeah.
I thought that it was supposed to be because of all the the war that's going to happen. That people are going to realize that Hashem is,
So you have different descriptions. If you think about the Shemona Esrei, the silent prayer, you have 3 blessings of praise, and you have 6 blessings where you make private petitions for you, for your community, for your time. And then there are 6, really 7 more, which are national. They talk about national, and they go up to the final redemption. Now, if you look at the order of the blessings there, you'll see that the very last blessing is coming of Mashiach, the last one, at the end. Not coming back to the land, and not restoring justice, and not rebuilding Yerushalayim. And that's based on the Gemara Megillah. That is one possible scenario where the Mashiach comes at the end. And it's all been done already. There are other possible scenarios. That's why the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim says the descriptions of the Messianic era are based on verses in the Tanakh, some in the Torah and many in the prophets. And the verses are vague and ambiguous and difficult to understand. And the Rambam says we have no oral tradition. And therefore, he says we're thrown back on the verses we don't understand, and therefore, we don't know exactly how it's going to happen until it happens. And he says, furthermore, it's not appropriate to invest time and effort studying these matters because they don't add to awe of Hashem and they don't add to the love of Hashem. Study how to do His will, study how to understand His Torah, and leave that to experience it when it comes. And we find in the Talmud different attitudes towards it. 2 of the Talmudic sages, the Amoraim, said, let him come, let the Mashiach come, and let me not see him. Because there is a prediction of a very disastrous war with many casualties, which again, no one is saying it has to happen, but it can happen. It's one of the, and they said, well, they're afraid of the test that will be they'll have to pass in living through those events. The Torah is very realistic about human psychology and human limitations, and being realistic is to recognize that it's a complex phenomenon and has different dimensions. There was a time many years ago when I perused some of psychology, and I think it's fair to say that the popular schools of psychological explanation and therapy each one has some truth in it, and each one makes the mistake of taking the some truth and making it the whole truth. There's not a sufficient appreciation for how complex and subtle the human being is, to the extent that we really don't understand very well what the human being is doing. And if you reduce a human being to a formula, whether it be Freud or whether it be Adler or whether it be Jung or whether it be existentialist therapy, if you reduce it to a formula, it's definitely not correct. They may have part of the truth, but because human beings aren't reducible to a formula like that. Even the one who has 64 different categories of people, and you can mold your picture. Miriam Adahan, who wrote about this, writes carefully and says, I'm not saying the categories are exact. I'm not saying that you push people into the categories. They guide your thinking. They guide your evaluation. But if you see people who straddle the two categories or in some other condition, you have to accept it and realize that it's only an aid. It's not really a complete description. Now, I'll just give you an illustration of this. The Gemara says that there are times when it is appropriate to pray that someone should die. Gemara in the Dorim. When is that? When he's got an incurable medical condition and he's in pain. Then, now of course, you can't take this as a general rule. You'd have to ask a rabbi to think about a particular case. It depends on the details. But there is such a category of people where you would pray that they should die. So my Rebbe Zatzal, who was in personal contact with all the great scholars of the age, when he went to visit them, he always prepared a question, to hear what this great scholar would say. And he went to Rav Shach Zatzal and asked him this question. Rav Shach said the following: when a person is in terminal disease and suffering terrible pain, he's undergoing a test of his emunah, his trust in God and his belief in God. And you're praying that he should be released from that test. And the example in the Gemara is Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the author of the Mishnah, the one whom we call our holy rabbi, Rabbi Yehuda Nossi. He was the one who, when he was terminal and he was in terrible pain, the whole yeshiva was praying that he should be saved, he should live, and his servant, his maidservant, was praying he should die. But because the whole yeshiva was praying, her prayers couldn't compete, so she caused a disturbance which distracted the yeshiva, and then her prayers went through and he died, and the Gemara says she was right and they were wrong. And from that, the Ran says there in the Dorim that there are times when we do pray that someone should die. Now, simplistically you could say, yeah, but isn't all of life about being tested? And when you respond to the test and you pass the test, that's life's biggest success. What do you mean you want to be reserved from the test? Yeah? When you do succeed, it's a great victory and you've accomplished a great deal. But also, there's a risk that it won't go well. And that risk has to be taken seriously. The Gemara has several cases where Tanoim were suffering, and another Tana came to visit who had some special merit, and the visitor said, do you want this suffering? And the patient said, I don't want the suffering and I don't want the reward. Lo heim v'lo schara. And then the visitor did something, prayed, and the suffering was relieved. So they themselves were realistic about what it means to stand in front of such a test. And we, every morning in the Holy Siddur, say, don't bring us into a test. So you ask, well, what do you say? You're going to give up your life? Give up free will? Give up? No. One purpose that a test can have is for you to take a certain type of situation seriously, realize how serious it is, and to make an effort to overcome it. What's motivating a person to say to God, please don't test me? He already realizes that the thing is serious, and he realizes that the test may cause him to do something which isn't appropriate, and he's afraid of doing the thing that isn't appropriate. He's already learned that lesson. By the very fact that he's asking not to be tested, it shows that he's learned that lesson. Under those conditions, the Kodesh Baruch Hu could listen to the prayer. So I'm just pointing out that all these things which depend upon the psychology of the people at the time and what kind of effect it will have on them are very subtle, very deep, and that's why you'll have different opinions, and one has to be prepared to spend your time in indecision and doubt, because we're not going to have a clear total picture. Yeah? No. Yeah.
So the question, one who bad things happen to good people is probably like the most asked question. It's really frustrating to hear it again and again. But I've never heard a good answer, and I was wondering what your take is on it.
Okay, pardon me for being pugnacious at the beginning, but you have a question and you want a good answer. Let me give you a comparison. What is it that makes people sick? I want to hear a good answer. I think you should reject that question. There are about 24 things that make people sick. You want an answer to what makes people sick? You're not in a position to understand the reality. And why good people suffer? Rav Moshe Chaim Sato in the Way of God in Part 2, Chapters 2 and 3, has about 8 different reasons. And that doesn't exhaust all of them. There are many others as well. So what you really have to understand is an encyclopedia of reasons, and any answer you get is going to be partial. And if you take the ball and run with it, you're going to be in serious trouble. He told me this is why people suffer. No. He told you this is one of 20 reasons why they suffer, and there are another 19, so don't attribute everything to this reason because it's only one of 20. So once you understand that it's a complicated, I can give you a few examples, but I'm worried about someone taking one and saying, oh, this is the reason and therefore, and it's simply not true. One of the reasons that people suffer is that when they transgress, it leaves a mark. Transgression is not only a violation of the law and a violation of God's will, but it leaves a mark on the person's soul. And suffering can be rehabilitation for the soul. Maimonides writes that a person who does tshuva, this is the time of tshuva, no punishment follows. There can't be any punishment. It's a barrier in front of punishment that punishment cannot cross. Still, there are certain types of transgressions where it says, in order to rid yourself of the responsibility, to rid yourself of them, you need tshuva, Yom Kippur, and suffering. So the Rambam says there's no punishment, and the Mishnah says, and he quotes it, that it's going to be suffering. What's that suffering? That suffering is not punishment. That suffering is simply the result of what the person did to himself. That has to be rehabilitated. It's like surgery. The person is foolish enough to go motorcycle racing, and he has a crash, and he has broken bones, and he says, I realize now, it was foolish, it was dangerous, I shouldn't have done it, I'll never do it again, I'll write articles and I convince people not to do it. So in terms of his attitude towards what he did, his attitude is perfect now. But he has the broken bones. And the broken bones still need surgery, and that's going to be painful. So that's one reason why people suffer. They suffer as rehabilitation from the damage that was done by the transgressions that they committed. That's one reason. Another reason is to alert people that something's wrong that needs attention. There are people who are floating through life, and you ask them, how are things? Everything's fine. Well, that's because, you're asleep most of the time, because you're not looking carefully. Many years ago, I went to Cape Town, the first time of many times I went, and I was told that Cape Town in the summer, there's only one question: when to turn over. Because you're on the beach and you're getting a suntan, and the only question is, when shall I turn over and tan the other side, right? That's all there is to life in Cape Town in the summer. Well, one hopes you grow to a little bit older, mature age where you realize there are lots of other things to do in life than get a tan on the beach. So here, sometimes suffering is to shake a person up, to make him think, where am I? What am I doing? What are my goals? Am I really taking life seriously in the appropriate way? To force him to look again. So that's another thing which is tied to failure. Another thing is that suffering is a way of giving a person an opportunity to develop a certain spiritual consciousness. Suffering forces you to think, well, how am I related to the Creator? And what are my expectations for interacting with the Creator? Now, we have a pair of blessings that we make, as a Mishnah and Brachos. When good things happen, we make either Atov Ameti V'Shechayonu, where we praise and thank God for the good thing that happened. When bad things happen, yes, the Mishnah says bad things, and it means bad things. Bad things do happen. There's a different blessing, and that blessing is Dayan Hames. either the judge of truth or the true judge. And the Mishnah is presupposing you can tell which is which, because the Mishnah is practical law. When it's good, make this blessing. When it's bad, make that blessing. Okay, so now the Gemara explains, yes, you make the blessing, and you should make the blessing in joy, similar to the way you make the blessing on good things in joy. Well, the commentators analyze this idea. When something good happens, you're joyful about the thing that happened. And then you thank God for that wonderful thing, which makes you happy. When something bad happens, and it disturbs you, and makes you sad, you're not told to rejoice in the sad thing that happened. The Bach says it's impossible. It's not human to do that. So what does it mean? You should make the blessing, Daina Emes, with Simcha. So the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch say the following. They say, when a person is suffering, he has the opportunity to accept the suffering with love. To say, Ribono Shel Olam, I know that you love me. I know you mean this for my good. And I accept it in the spirit of the love that from which it comes. And that is a very great service of God. It's a very great performance, spiritual performance. And the joy comes from the opportunity to have that great spiritual performance. Because mitzvah is what creates simcha. There, you can't have the joy without the suffering. If someone will take away the suffering, then the reason for the joy disappears. It's specifically the way in which I accept the suffering. That's the third reason. Then there's the fourth reason, which I don't know whether everyone agrees to, but the Kabbalists all talk about it, Lutzato in particular. A person is put into this world to create something. In particular, he's put into a life situation where there are challenges, and he's put there to respond to the challenges in the appropriate way, so as to put a certain type of human spiritual success into the historical record. Now let's say his purpose in the world is to perfect the response to poverty. That's what he was put here for. He's going to be poor all of his life. Period. He can pray for money, it's not going to come. Why? Not because he's guilty. He's not guilty of anything. He's totally innocent. Not because God is distant from him. Not at all. On the contrary. He put him here for that purpose. This is the tikkun that he contributes to the perfection of the world. Souls are crafted for a particular type of perfection that needs to be instituted into the world. So that's his place in the world. So this has nothing to do with failure, has nothing to do with crime, has nothing to do with sin. It's simply that's the position that he was given in the world. So that's four different reasons. And there are others as well. So I'm giving you a variety and reminding you that it's a compound and complex question, and there's a great deal of literature on the subject.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, sure.
So, like, in terms of like when a child dies, it's kind of similar to your fourth answer, where like there's the idea that you only live to 120 years, and like if you died prior to that, it was maybe because you completed your mission. So, like, is it like a child, for example, dying at a young age? Is his like death the bad thing that happens to a good person, being his father, and he therefore completed his mission, or like?
It can be, but again,
not, like,
the spirit in which you ask the question is this the answer? And I'm trying to reform your vocabulary as to, is this one of the 16 answers that might be relevant? You're still looking for the answer, and that's a mental set which is it's dangerous. Because when you get an answer, for you it'll be the answer, and then you try to plug every case into that answer, and it won't work. And it can't work because it isn't the answer. So, of course, you didn't tell me whether the child is an adult or a minor. If he's a minor, then his actions can't contribute to the reason why he dies.
Like a minor, like why would
You mean less than 13 for a boy?
Yeah, why would
Okay, so then there's another reason, which again, how shall I say it? It's certainly part of the Kabbalistic tradition, and the Hasidic world and the Sephardi world and many of the Ashkenazi world accepted. Would everybody agree? Maybe not, but that's reincarnation. That soul was in the world before, went through a whole lifetime, and left behind some baggage that has to be dealt with, and this is a way of dealing with it. So that's it. Now we have 5 reasons, and there are more. So, yeah, who's next? Yeah.
I sent some questions, so I don't know the
Oh.
background of this question. So maybe you could help us. What is your opinion on the 3 oaths? I've heard you talk about how you disagree with Netruri Karta or Satmar on them, but what do you hold and why? If this can't be done in a question, I'd love it if you did a shiur on the subject.
I have not examined. I read the writings of the Satmarova on it many, many years ago. I don't know it in great detail. It would be a great question for Rabbi Brandeis. All the questions are great questions for Rabbi Brandeis. He's phenomenal. But there is the idea that there are 3 oaths that we're supposed to have taken, and the goyim. There are 3 oaths that limit our options of what we can do. And one of them is that we shouldn't take back the land of Israel by force. But one of the oaths is that the non-Jews should not put too much pressure on us. And now, since they clearly violated their oath, it could be that the oaths are a package deal. And since one is limiting them and one is limiting us, and they violated the one that was assigned to them, that may then mean that our oath is no longer limiting us either.
Can Bob just explain what are the 3 oaths? I don't even know what is this about.
Chazal say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu caused. I'm trying to remember what the 3rd one is. That Shalom Yalu B'Chava, we're not supposed to take the land. And made us swear. Who did it? When was it done? Was it done in dreams? Was it done in the world? I don't know. But this is the bottom line. There was an oath that we shouldn't take the land by force, and they took an oath not to oppress us too much. Too much is vague. Yes, it is vague. Okay, but the Holocaust is clearly over the line, and the Chmielnicki pogroms are clearly over the line. So there's no question that they violated it. And since one limits their added activities to us, and the other limits our activities to them, there's an idea that there's a reciprocity between them, and if they violate their limitations to us, then our limitations vis-a-vis them no longer applies, and therefore we can take it by force. The other thing they say, if the United Nations approved it, so we didn't rebel against the nations of the world. You know, what about Iceland? What about Indonesia? What about Australia? I mean, you know, the fact that the local population is against, that wouldn't be called rebelling against the nations of the world. And if we took it by force from them when the rest of the nations said okay, so then that wouldn't be a violation either. So there are historical subtleties and subtleties of how the oaths work that leave room for discussion. But this is very incomplete on my part because I've never studied it in great detail. Yeah.
I had an experience the other day of looking at something very colorful, and it really sparked inspiration and something within me. I want to know what the spiritual, so to say, reality of what color is.
Well, I don't know if it's color or it's beauty that's moving you. I imagine a patch of color, just that color, with nothing else. Could be a nice color, but I find it hard to believe that would really inspire you. It's a whole scene which has multiple colors and they interact with one another in various ways. Well, the Torah talks about beauty. It says that Rivka was beautiful, and Rachel was beautiful, and Yosef was beautiful, and Esther was beautiful, and these aren't criticisms. It says that Jerusalem is beautiful. Klilas Yofi, the highest beauty. So I heard from Rav Moshe Shapiro, Zechron Livracha, one idea, and that is that beauty is supposed to express a kind of inner reality. And when it does so, the beauty itself is something that's positive. There's a famous verse in Eshes Chayil. Sheker achein v'hevel hayofi, false is charm and beauty is empty. Isha yiras Hashem hi tishalo, the woman who fears Hashem, who has awe for Hashem, she shall be praised. And the Gaon of Vilna says that the first part of the verse that dismisses charm and beauty is only for a woman who doesn't satisfy the second half of the verse. But if a woman does live on awe for God and fear for God, then her charm and beauty are positive because they express that reality. How charm and beauty express that inner reality? So my Rebbetzin has had a thought about it. I read in one of the things that she wrote. Beauty is marked. Beauty is a tough subject, and there's no agreed upon analysis of it. And aesthetics is a backwater in philosophy where not a lot of great work has been done. So I'm saying simplistic things now, but there's a certain harmony, a certain integration of the elements. Let's say in a beautiful picture, or in a poem, or in a beautiful piece of music. And there are also contrasts, and the contrasts usually get resolved into harmony by the end. And that's a picture of a certain life process, because life has challenges, and life has failure of understanding, indecision, ambivalence, and then sometimes sparks of inspiration, and then there are resolutions. So these types of beauty can express a kind of life process that has the form and the shape and the dimensions that are very valuable. I want to mention, because when I was in graduate school, I had a professor who did work on aesthetics, and he said, great art is not the same as beautiful art. You can have pictures that express horror, pain, destruction. It'd be very funny to call the picture beautiful, but they express it. And when you look at the picture and you feel the horror in it, that's great art, because it teaches you how to incorporate that feeling. So we mustn't limit the function of art to simply beauty. Take the Tehillim of which David Melech edited and wrote many of them. Poetry in general, not all great poetry is happy poetry. Some of it's very sad. Some of it's very bitter. That doesn't mean it's not great. But the happy poetry, the poetry that gives you a nice resolution at the end, that's something which is a vision of life functioning well, life functioning in a way that brings to a gain, to a lift. So I think that beauty is very fundamental. The Mishkan, the tabernacle, had in it very beautiful things. Some of the tapestries were woven in such a way that there was one design on one side and a different design on the other side. Some kind of master weaving. The same threads. And the two sides, they had two different pictures. And then there were certain things that were there that were one-sided. And there were statues. Now, I know, you're not supposed to do statues. The Torah tells you how to do it. But there are limitations over them. So on, Solomon made statues of angels. Golden statues. Put them in the temple that he constructed. There were also big basins of water on the backs of 4 bulls. So even statuary, in certain cases, in certain ways, and the Keruvim, the angels on the cover of the Aron Kodesh, in the Holy of Holies. So art is definitely an element of expression, and has a spiritual source. Those are a few things that I heard from Rabbi Moshe Shapiro.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Can I ask a halachic question on Lashon HaRa?
You can. I'm not really trained in halacha. If I happen to know the answer, I'll tell you.
So, like, if you had to think in your head badly about someone who wouldn't constitute Lashon HaRa because nobody's hearing it, so like, you use that logic when if you like having a conversation and you speak badly about someone but you don't ever say their name. Like, is that still like Lashon HaRa or?
So first of all, Lashon HaRa is not constituted in thought. It's not laws of thinking. There are other reasons why you shouldn't think bad things about people, 100%. That would not be called Lashon HaRa. It's the reason why it's called tongue for speech. Right? Now, doing it anonymously when no one knows who it is, I don't think that counts as Lashon HaRa. Of course, it's very subtle. If he's a member of a category, and the listener comes to think badly of the category, he's a yeshiva student. Where? I'm not telling you. Which yeshiva? I'm not telling you. Aha, but it's a story about a yeshiva student. And there are people who say, yeah, that's yeshiva students. That's what they like. And then that would be Lashon HaRa. Because then you're bringing down the person's appreciation of a whole group of people. I think that would be Lashon HaRa. But where there's no identification whatsoever, I don't think that's... I don't think it would be called Lashon HaRa.
And like following along with the conversation with someone by name.
But one second, but that doesn't mean it's okay to do. Because there are other reasons why one shouldn't speak badly of other people, just not to be in the habit of speaking badly of other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I'm listening in on a conversation where a person by name is spoken badly about, and I'm like following along with the conversation but not adding on, under Lashon HaRa specifically, does that constitute it?
So there's a machlokes. Some say it's enough if you make sure that you don't believe it. Which, by the way, I try to be careful not to say things which will lead people astray. When I say don't believe it, I don't mean disbelieve it. Don't believe it means I don't accept it. I don't reject it either. That's what he said. Who knows? Maybe it's true, maybe it's false. Because disbelieving it would be coming to a conclusion about the truth. And you're probably not in a position where that's reasonable to come to any conclusion at all. Just don't come to any conclusion. Some say that that's enough. And some say that even that's not enough. Even hearing it, you shouldn't hear it. I know there are two opinions. Who holds the opinions and which is the more dominant opinion, I don't know. But I do know there are two opinions about that. But there's another thing. If statements are made which are inappropriate to make, there's a problem with just sitting there. Just like seeing someone do something wrong. There's a problem with sitting there because by sitting there and not speaking up, it's as if you don't see anything wrong with it. And there, often, there's a responsibility to say, excuse me, I don't think that's right. I don't think it's right to do that. So if the person doesn't gain illicit support from the fact, well, he was there, he didn't say anything, which is the story of Kamsa bar Kamsa, if you've heard of it. You know, it says the rabbis were there and they didn't complain, so then there's something rotten in the whole system. Here, we're not talking about rabbis, but still, if something happens which is inappropriate, let's say A insults somebody, B, you know, it would be appropriate to say, I don't think that was right to do. So that so it doesn't go past without some expression of the truth about what really should be done. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, going back to what he asked before the mic. So your second answer was that another reason for the that bad things happen to good people was to alert somebody about the sin that they might be committing. How do they know which sin they're committing? Like, I mean, you can go and look back, but I mean, come on, people are sinning so much. Like, I mean, I mean myself.
That's a golden question.
Saying, like, it's so hard. Like,
That's a golden question. In fact, I have a book coming out of Hashem in a couple of months, and I deal with that question in great detail. And I believe that you can't know. Typically, you can't know. And I have a lot of sources about it. And when the Gemara says like this, where it says, when a person sees that suffering is coming upon him, let him check his actions. If he checked his actions and didn't find, what didn't he find? He didn't find. Then he should attribute his suffering to a failure of study of Torah. If he didn't find that, then he should know that the suffering is coming from God's love. That's what the Gemara says. Well, that Gemara is very, very difficult to understand. Let's take stage one. See suffering, you should check his actions. Isn't study of Torah one of his actions? That's one of his actions, one of the mitzvos. Checking his actions, surely you should check that. So then it says, well, if you didn't find anything, attribute it to a failure of Torah study. So I guess that means we're not assuming that our ability to check our actions is perfect. Otherwise, we'd say it's not that, something else. No, attribute it to a failure of Torah study. Then it says, if you attribute it to failure of Torah study and you don't find that it's true, then, wait a second, don't find that it's true. Just a minute. I attributed it blank. I don't know where it is. I don't know what it is. What do you mean? And I investigated and didn't find it. I didn't find it in the first place. What is it talking about? So one of the commentaries explains as follows. Okay, I checked my actions. I didn't find anything. So the Gemara says, attribute it to a failure of Torah study. I didn't find any failure of Torah study, but maybe, if I'm very careful to correct my Torah study and do my Torah study in an ideal way, then if it's a failure of Torah study that's causing the problem, it'll go away. So that I can do without finding it, without finding the failure. Let me explain a little bit some of the background here. You investigate your actions. Some of the things that you did wrong, you didn't know were wrong. You thought they were okay. Why are you being held responsible for them? Because you should have investigated. And you were lazy and irresponsible in not investigating. But the bottom line is, you did it thinking it was okay. How are you going to find that when you investigate? I did X, Y, Z, they're okay. And you keep going. And that's it, and that's there it is. So not always are you able to find it. So here you say, okay, I don't know what I did with Talmud Torah. I forgot it, because the things that I do and I think are okay, I typically forget them. They're not staying on my mind. But now I'm going to be careful. When can I take off for Talmud Torah? How much time should I give? And what investment should I make? And all the rest. I'm going to do it as ideally as possible. And if I do it as ideally as possible, and I don't find it, then I attribute it to God's love for me. So here's a sixth reason, or a seventh reason already. There's something called Yisurim Shel Ahava, love, suffering that comes from God's love. Now what is that? Well, Rashi says, on the spot, God gives a person suffering to increase his reward in the world to come. And others disagree with Rashi. They say, why shouldn't he eat at both tables? If he's a good person, why must he suffer here in order to get more reward there? Why can't he get reward here and there? Why is it suffering that purchases more reward? So they reject that. The Rambam and the Ramban reject that. They have other explanations. The Rambam rejects the whole statement, because the statement of one scholar, and he says it can't be, it's not fit with God's justice. The Ramban says there are certain types of transgressions which are expiated by this type of suffering of love, because Baruch Hu loves you, and it's shogeg, transgressions that were done unintentionally, and they have to be cleansed, otherwise you have trouble in the world to come. And he says you can't cleanse them in Gehenna. He doesn't explain why. This is in Shar HaGvul. He says he doesn't explain why, so this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love for the person. So now, here's a case where the person's suffering is a matter of cleansing something that he didn't know about and therefore he couldn't find. So here you see that we're assuming sometimes suffering comes and you're not going to be able to find the right answer to what caused it. And there are many other cases like that as well. So the idea, one explanation is when it says when it's person's suffering, he should check his actions. It's not that he's looking for the cause of the suffering, but he's saying there must be something wrong. I can show that I care about this by trying to improve. without knowing that this is the one that caused it. But Kodesh Baruch Hu is telling me that I'm not ideal, that I have problems. I will try to improve some of my performance so as to show Kodesh Baruch Hu that I care about this. And if you have heard of the concept of Mida Keneged Mida, I have a long discussion of that in the book, and there too, it's very, very difficult to pin down, using that concept, exactly why the suffering comes. So the attitude is that I take responsibility for the suffering, and act it out by improving my performance without claiming to have identified the particular sin that's causing the suffering. Learn to live with ignorance. That's the lesson that I try to give in the book.
How long would one, like, having made the changes and, like, living in an improved way, how long would it take before one says, like, okay, that's not working, or like, oh, it's like...
Again, your words say, I'm trying to do something to end the suffering. But now, according to the Kabbalists, one of the reasons for suffering is that's what you're put in the world to perfect. So it's not going to work. Nothing will work. Nothing will work because this is what you put in the world to do. So one mustn't think of finding the magic, the magic bullet, the silver bullet that's going to cure it. Maybe it's not something that can be cured. It should be cured.
I'm asking more so like in the Gemara that you were talking about. It said, like, okay, you should examine your actions, and then if you fail to find anything, then you like improve your Torah study, attributed Torah study, you improve that, and then if the Torah study like doesn't fix the problem, then something else. But like, how long do you know until it hasn't fixed the problem?
Oh, I see. Oh, I see what you mean. The second stage.
Like you could improve your Torah study and keep improving it, and it's been 2 years. At that point, do you say like, okay, it wasn't the Torah study?
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know how long it would have to be. And you'd have to have some external certification that, as far as can be humanly determined, you're doing a perfect job, which you could have. You could have that. There are people who have had that. So, but I have no way to evaluate that. And this is part and parcel of a whole set of questions about self-knowledge. When should I keep trying to do it this way, and when should I switch my strategy and do it a different way? Sometimes the Kodesh Baruch Hu just wants more effort, and sometimes the decision to use this strategy is the wrong decision. What you need to do is go to people who know the whole Torah and are great spiritual people. The Chafetz Chaim, who died in 1933, was quoted a number of times before he died that the First World War was child's play. So in round numbers, First World War, about 15 million people died, and in the Second World War, 60 million people died. Did he know something? Probably he did. Probably he knew that something worse was coming. How did he know? Either because he understood the Torah in that depth that he could draw it out of the Torah, or because so Hashem Lireyav, the Kodesh Baruch Hu shares things that otherwise can't be known with those who have this relationship with him. The Chafetz Chaim also said that Purim and Hanukkah teach us two lessons. Purim teaches us that if the non-Jewish oppressor wants to murder all of us because we're Jews, then the right response is tshuva. That's what turned it around in Purim. Tshuva. Hanukkah, the goal of the oppressor was to extinguish the Torah. Then we fought them. And we won. And that's what we should learn. And he said that in Russia, the Russian Revolution, an installation of the communist regime, communist dictatorship, we missed the boat. We should have gone to the forests and fought them, because they were trying to stamp out Yiddishkeit. They didn't want to just kill Jews. They didn't kill Jews. They used Jews in their Yevsektia. So these are things which great people can see, and because they are masters of the whole of the Torah, they can reveal them to us. And one can go to such people and say, look, here I am, here's what I've done, here's what I've done to try to improve. Shall I? And of course, what will be the what we call the nafkamina? Say, yeah, you've done enough time, it wasn't that, so now I can go back to doing the study of Torah haphazardly. Oh, I don't have to be so strict anymore because it's not working anyway. Not working. That you have to say, I'm doing this much better. That's a profit that I've had out of this. And okay, so then even though that Gemara says it's A, B, or C, I guess what you have to do is expand the category of Yisurim Shel Ahava. For example, here's another type of suffering: when the Kadosh Baruch Hu puts someone through a test. Tests are very difficult. Tension, worry, that's suffering. So maybe you heard about Abraham's sacrifice of Isaac, where he was told to sacrifice Isaac, and he was prepared to go through with it, and at the last minute, Kadosh Baruch Hu told him not to do it. His being willing to do it was enough to show that he appreciated it, and he was willing to follow God's command, and it didn't need to happen in action. And then the Torah says, the angel says to him, God swears that because you did this thing, you'll have various benefits. So the Midrash asks, God swears? Why is God swearing? Is it enough just to tell him that it's going to happen? And the Midrash says something very, very bitter. Because Baruch is giving Abraham a blessing. Abraham says to God, promise to me, swear to me, that you won't test me again. Avram said that to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Swear to me you won't test me again. Not only me, but don't test Isaac either. This is after the test was finished. After it was finished and he succeeded, but don't test me again. That's nishbati. I swore. Which means Abraham didn't sail through it. He didn't sail through it. It was very difficult. It was the 10th test. The Chazal say, God said to Abraham, stand for me in this test so that the critics will not say that the first 9 tests were trivial. That's a long, deep story. Why would they have said they were trivial? Why would the 10th test have rehabilitated the first 9? Not just being more difficult and showing you have greater strength, but rehabilitated the first 9. Okay, I've spoken about that. You can find it on my tapes. But it was very difficult. Kovash is Rachmav is the way it's described. He conquered his mercy. And mercy is a moral quality, not just like a bleeding heart liberal. It's not just feeling bad. It's a conceptual thing. At any rate, that's another type of suffering, and it has to be taken into account. I have that in my book also, where talking in great detail what that status of the suffering of tests, which is now number 8. Right, we've had 8 out of 20. And some people, one of my chavrusas, wants to explain Rashi that way. When Rashi says that you suffer here to have a greater reward there, it could be, like I said in the name of the Torah, the Shulchan Aruch, he's given suffering as an opportunity to receive them with love, which is then a great test, and it's passing the test that gets him the extra reward in the world to come. Not just the bare suffering. So that would respond to the critique that some have of Rashi's position. But because of the continued discussion, you're beginning to see there's a tremendous variety, and they don't all fit in one category. And they're certainly not all a matter of guilt. Certainly not all a matter of guilt. Listen. Yeah.
Another question was saying, is nature lacking in any way, or is it perfect like Hashem?
Okay, here's a very interesting question. Is nature lacking in any way, or is it perfect what?
Like Hashem.
Perfect as Hashem?
Like Hashem.
like Hashem. Imagine the following experience. I get a package in the mail as a box. And on the box is a beautiful picture. I think, wow, somebody sent me a picture. That's very nice. I could frame it and put it up over there. I open up the box, and it's full of irregularly shaped pieces of cardboard. Wow. Somebody destroyed the picture. Some kid got to the picture with a scissors, and he ruined my picture. I want my money back. No, it's a gift. Okay, I'll tell him. No, it's a picture puzzle. It's a picture puzzle. Is it a perfect picture? Well, it's a perfect picture puzzle. It is a picture puzzle. It's perfect, right? It's not supposed to be a picture. It's supposed to be a picture puzzle. So when we talk about something being perfect, a lot of it is it perfectly suited for its purpose? Not is it perfect in some abstract way. Now, someone could say, sickness? This world is not perfect. If it were perfect, there wouldn't be any sickness. Well, that's in ignorance of what the purpose of the world is supposed to be. But maybe a world with sickness in it is perfect for the purpose the world is supposed to fulfill. Namely, knowing there's danger and using your intelligence to figure out strategies to avoid the danger, and using your will to control your behavior so that you don't suffer from the danger. And that's part of the purpose the world is supposed to serve. We have two basic aspects of our motivation, the good inclination and the evil inclination. And it's evil. And God made it. And yes, it is evil. The Gemara says, I feel Yotzer Kol Hara, because it's called Yetzer Hara, in the Yetzer Adam Rabbi Urav, says in the verse, and it says, even his creator called it evil. Of course, it's evil for the sake of good. So you say, how could this world be perfect if it has evil in it? It could, because the existence of evil in the world is perfect for the goal the world is supposed to fulfill. So in that sense, nature is certainly perfect. It says, Hashem saw all that he had made at the end of the sixth day, and behold, it was very good. Doesn't mean 80% good and the other 20%, he made mistakes and it's a failure. That's not our God. Maybe that belongs to us, some other religious tradition, but not us. No, it's perfect as an instrument for the goal for which he created it. It's a little bit like vestigial organs, which is a double lesson. There's supposed to be organs in the body or in the limbs, the way the limbs are arranged, which is suboptimal, because evolution tinkers with the previous design and only makes local changes and local improvements, and it has more offspring that will carry along all the failures, and only has to be good as a whole. And if it has failures in it, if there's the good outweighs the failures, it's going to be an evolutionary success, so on and so on. And they take the existence of vestigial organs, which don't function perfectly, according to them, as part of the evidence that evolution is correct. Well, first of all, their blindness, simplicity, childishness in analyzing what the organs do caused them to make many, many mistakes. The eye is optimally designed, with the optic nerve going down through the middle of the retina. It's optimally designed. You can read about it. And the other elements in the body. The appendix does store bacteria, and studies have been done that people without an appendix recover less well from certain types of surgery, just that in the evolutionary atmosphere, no one will pay you to do the study because they don't want to find out that maybe it has a use. But it does have a use. So that's one thing. The science was done very poorly in a prejudiced way. But if you ask what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants out of the human body, then what you think of as a perfect human body may not be relevant. One very great contemporary philosopher, Peter van Inwagen, points out, if you want to use science to attack religion, you're always going to have some religious premise in your scientific argument, otherwise it won't be relevant. God can't be running the universe because of this. What? The elbow is a poor joint for lifting weights. Because the elbow is a poor joint, therefore God can't be running the world? How do you make the connection? Well, if God were doing it, he'd make the body perfect. Oh, really? Well, let me ask you, where did you get that from? You're talking about God now. You didn't learn that in a laboratory. You didn't learn that from observing nature. You must be taking it from some religious tradition. Show me the source. What religion says that? You always need a religious commitment against which to play the scientific finding in order to draw a conclusion that God can't be the one that's doing it. And those religious commitments, the people who do it, like Dawkins and what's the psychologist's name, was all the rage nowadays. Forget his name. These people don't take responsibility for the hidden religious premise. So their arguments typically they're just not addressing the right subject. Anyway, so that's what has to be done when you talk about perfection of nature or anything else. Yeah, you have a last question there? Then I'm going to quit.
The idea of having multiple wives, it goes against the idea that man and woman are two halves of the soul, that we can have to become whole. How do we explain the avot having multiple wives?
Multiple wives. Well, there are a few things to say here. First of all, if you read the words, I know that's a radical suggestion today, but you might try it. All of the multiple wives that they had only because others wanted them to do it. Sarah asked Abraham to take her handmaid to wife. And Rachel was substituted by Leah, and to marry her at all, she would be the second wife. Leah didn't ask for it, but Rachel shouldn't be lost. And then the handmaids, each of his wives told him, please take the handmaid. So they didn't opt for it, they didn't do it. It was pushed on them, number one. Number two, the commitment to monogamy, to me, is a little odd. There are always more women than men. Because men kill themselves in stupidities like war and motorcycle and bungee jumping and drugs and so forth and so on. So to enforce monogamy means some women can't be married. Really? Well, now suppose you have two women who say, we both want to marry this man, and we're both doing it of our own free will, and it's better than not being married, and we're making the best choice for our lives. Who are you, as a liberal, to tell them, you mustn't do that because I say you can't do it? Why can't they do it? Polygamy allows for women who want to be married to marry. Well, in our tradition, you can't marry a woman against her will, so she's got to opt for it. So, now, the idea of two halves of one, the question is whether one person can't play that role too many. And there are sources which talk in Kabbalistic terms that a man can play that role for many women, and a woman can't play that role for many men. I can't. I'm just reporting to you. I can't explain it. I don't know well enough to. But that, of course, you're right. That's the bottom line. Bottom line is what's the spiritual reality, and that a man can present himself wholly to many women. And if that's questionable in your mind, if that's odd in your mind, well, let's think. Suppose you have 4 children. Does each child only get 1/4 of your love? I don't think so. And suppose you're married and you have 4 children. So now it's divided by 5 because some of your love goes to your wife? No. You can wholly love your wife and you can wholly love each child, can't you? So it is possible for one person to wholly love a number of other people. That's not an impossibility. Now the question is whether it's just divided by sex. And that's what the Torah is teaching us ultimately, that a man can wholly love more than one woman, and a woman can't do that for a man. If that bothers your sensibilities and it bothers your feminine commitments, okay, so then it's something that you'll have to struggle with. But that's the ultimate explanation. It's got to be in spiritual terms. That's quite correct. Okay, very good.